a document. That's like, yeah, panopticon stuff happening now. So, but like, if you have pen, paper, just a Word doc open, whatever, make some notes to yourself. That will be really helpful. Most of the point of today's presentation is to take something that I think sometimes feels a little bit unapproachable or at least strange, and to make it something personal, make it something useful for you, for your organization, especially now, especially if you lead people. I'm going to attempt to share a screen. So Tamara, if you could tell me if something weird happens or if I need to swap displays. Are you seeing the presenter view or the regular one?
I see presenter view.
How about now?
Yeah, perfect.
All right. So, I think that the kernel thing to walk away with this presentation is just to know that your brain is essentially is working against you. Especially, this is something that people I think viscerally can understand now. But there's two main ways, or two ways we're going to talk about today anyway. I'm sure that there's a lot of ways that your brain could be working against you, but we're going to talk about two of them for today. One is that your brain is optimized for your circumstances. So whatever's happening around you, it seems to be the thing that takes up most of the bandwidth of your consciousness, what it is you're going to concentrate on. And we are really good at finding what is wrong. We're good at finding error. And I'm going to talk about why it is that that's working against you right now. So thing one, right, this whole idea of being optimized for your circumstances. What I want you to do right now, and this is not a test that you have to pass, but I want to think of you to think of you plus 10 years from now. So take your age, add 10 years to it, and just think for a moment about that person. Specifically, I would like you to think of what do you think you look like physically. So describe yourself. This can just be a couple notes to yourself. You can just think about it. Think about you. So for example, I'm 41, I'd be 51 years old. So I'd be thinking about like how much more salt is appearing in here, uh, that sort of thing. Just think about you physically. Take a moment and think about what you think your home is going to be like in 10 years from now. So um, who's there? How does it feel? How is it structured? Where is it located? Are you still working out of your home?
Mhm.
Yeah. I want you to take a moment and think about, and again, just quick intuitive thoughts. What do you think might be better? What might be better for you 10 years from now than your present day state? So if you were like 99% of the people out there, when you think about you plus 10 years from now, what you're actually doing when you write about that person is you are thinking about a stranger to yourself. You're thinking about your brain is actually operating in a way and accessing portions of your mind, of your physical brain, that you would normally associate with how you interpret a stranger, someone who's other than you, specifically someone that you don't trust. So the nerdy fMRI scan data on this, the white line represents the pattern in your mind of your current self. So I'm Jeremy. I woke up this morning, sitting in my kitchen, all that stuff, right? This is how I could think about my present day self. When I think about my future self, the green line, I'm actually using a similar brain pattern to the one I use for a current other or a future other. So my brain is on a default setting is more so thinking about, when I think about Jeremy at 51, I'm thinking about someone I don't know, and likely someone for whom I would need to build trust. So yeah, you don't trust your future self. And this explains to a degree, at least, why it's so hard to do a lot of things, right? Like, why would I work on fitness for a future self when I could watch Netflix now? Why would I try to make improvements to my home when I can be comfortable? Like, why finish these projects? And financially, why am I going to give money right now to someone I don't know? I'm going to give money to a stranger. And in business, you see this show up, right? With the what about this quarter? How are we going to make our financial goals short term? So um, it explain like you are optimized for that kind of thinking. Thing two. So take that, put that aside. Thing two, to get at thing two, this whole idea of finding error, I want you to do another thought exercise, and that is, I want you to think of your high school prom, just in general, just on an instinct level. Um, and I don't even mean that you had to go, right? Because like maybe you thought of your date, maybe you thought of the dance itself, maybe you thought of the after party, and maybe you just didn't go, right? Maybe all that's true. But this is my non-scientific, I have no data to support this. I've just talked to enough people about prom here recently because all these seniors couldn't go to theirs. And when I exchanged stories with people about their prom, they told me what they remember. They told me about they didn't get the date they wanted. They talked about something awkward or stupid they did that night, something they said that they regretted later. Or they talked about crying in parking lot. Crying in parking lot came up a lot, you know. Um, so these are the things that we actually pull out. These are the things that we hone in on, right? Well, why is this? And some of this is explained through what's understood to be a negativity bias. And among the many biases that have been studied by psychologists, this one seems to have a quorum of and a good consensus of people that agree that we as a species have been optimized and we've evolved to find what's wrong. And this shows up when, like, you'll notice when you do some work and you don't get more credit for going above and beyond, but you really get penalized easily for not doing the thing you said you were going to do. Um, you know, when you give someone a review, and have you ever been told to do tell them two good points and then tell them the criticism and then tell them something nice after? It's why when you tell them the two good points, all they're doing is waiting for you to drop the hammer, and anything you said ahead of the good stuff, they're just going to focus on the criticism, right? Um, why the news and media are seen as merchants of the bad. Well, people, and then like when you ask people like, well, what kind of news are you looking for? And they talk about positivity, but I'm sure only because the data would support that those are the same people that are reading the detailed articles of all the gory and bad things that are happening, which you can find quite readily right now. I'm sure you're aware. So Baumeister, the positive psychologist who studied this, it's his life's work. He said the mind evolved to overreact to negative things. To compensate for that, it's good to take a moment to stop and consider the positive. It's not just fluffy stuff, right? I mean, it makes sense. Those two sort of mechanisms in our mind make sense for survival, right? Well, you should focus on your present day circumstances. Worked really well when we were hunter gatherers, and it's like something's chasing after you. It's probably best to continue running and not think about the possibilities of the future, right? You're probably better off worrying about your circumstances. You're also probably better off from an evolution perspective when you're trying to survive, just trying to play whack-a-mole with the things that are problematic or could harm you. Um, the unfortunate thing is that this is where our minds have evolved, and how well do those minds serve us in our present day circumstance. So our brains work against us, right? On a default sort of setting, our brains work against us. And you're here today because you want to achieve something bigger than you, and that it's going to live beyond the present. So if your mind is so ensnared with the circumstances, working off your default, it's not going to work, right? Um, and so you would be well to think about how it is you could go about building some empathy for your future self. How could you go about getting to know that person, that stranger that you thought of, 10 years in the future? How could you build empathy for that person, get to know that person better? And this is a lot of the some of the, the fuel behind why it is strategic foresight exists. But, just telling people, right, so you're really distracted with the present day. So what you should do is think about possibilities, is kind of like telling someone with like no legs to just get up and walk somewhere, right? It's like, okay, well, then what do I do? Um, if this really is a default setting, and if things are really complex for me right now, or if I'm in a crisis, how can I start? Well, these are three techniques that futurists use, and they're going to border on sounding like self-helpy or like psychology, because they have been used in therapy and in some psychology. It turns out that the inability to see or cast images of the future is actually a better indicator of depression than trauma from the past. Some people suffer trauma in their past and they don't suffer depression, but psychologists have found that if you have a hard time understanding any possible futures for yourself or visualizing those, that's actually a better indicator that you might actually be suffering from some form of depression. And right now, like I said, you've got a lot of the sort of indicators that more people could be having a hard time for all kinds of reasons. So we're going to do three things. We're going to do things, and they're not going to be cognitively challenging. These are just things that I'm going to entreat you to try to do, and then you're going to share them with another person, at least one of them. So just make some notes to yourself as we go through these, but these are called predicting the past, remembering the future, and hard empathy. So we're going to jump right in, and this first one, predicting the past. So have your notes ready, your Word doc open. What I want you to do is I want you to go back to when you woke up this morning, when the glow from your cell phone went off on this Monday morning. I want you to go back, and instead of doing what you did, which going and making coffee, whatever, I want you to start packing a bag. I want you to visualize what bag that might be. I want you to think about the bags you have. I want you to start putting a bag together to travel. And I want you to go on a trip, a safe trip, a trip that is socially distance aware, but I want you to go on a trip. And while those might be limited these days, you still can get in your car. So I want you to think of somewhere you love that you could get to. And that's going to have an impact on what you're packing in your bag, right? What things are you putting in there? And to really complete this exercise, it's 12:19 p.m. Central Time here. If you think back to when you woke up this morning and you fast forward to right now, I want you to ask yourself, where would your alternate self be right now? What would you be doing? Would you be in your car listening to a podcast? Would you be, sitting at a park somewhere? To complete the exercise, to complete this, you woke up this morning, you didn't do what you did. You actually went a completely different route, and you decided to get into a vehicle of some kind or on your bike or what have you, and you went on a trip to somewhere you love. Where is the alternate you? We'll give a few minutes. It's more awkward via Zoom to give a few minutes, but we'll give a couple minutes.
I am sure you could get some flights for cheap right now.
You can. I looked at them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Might have cargo on the seat next to you, but it'll work.
Do what?
You might have some cargo boxes. I hear that commercial flights are putting boxes on seats to fill more cargo.
There you have it.
Yeah.
So what does this do? Why did I ask you to do this? Well, what it's meant to help you to get your brain in the process of building some mental muscle around is to understand that today is contingent. And we understand this in the abstract. Like I said, people understand when you say, oh, there's more that's possible. Or it's easy to understand that today is contingent. People learned that when they watched It's a Wonderful Life. Like it turned out that if George Bailey did this, that all kinds of different sort of cascading things matriculated. But what it's meant to do is make it personal to you. So your day was contingent. You made choices, you made decisions, and you shaped the way that your day is going. And the thing that's beautiful about that is that means that you can shape future events with today's choices. So that means that if you could have shaped something differently just hours ago and it could have had an impact on your day, then that means you can shape future events with the choices you're making now. So it's a way, it's to create a way into finding your own agency. So this would help, hopefully help your mind to start to build some mental muscle around what are different choices I could make that would have an impact on the kinds of futures I'm hoping to create for myself. So that's the end of that technique. We're going to fly through these. So mostly because, again, not cognitively challenging, and don't make it something that's arduous or too detailed, but it can just be something that instinctually you can understand. So remembering the future is the next one. Remembering the future, I want you to think of X, put an X, and next to it, I want you to write something you love to do. So this could be a hobby. This could be giving your significant other a hard time. It can be running, writing, some discipline you have for yourself. It could be like a big abstraction. I like leading an organization that creates more opportunities for the underserved or something like that. It has to be something you love. Why? Next to why, write down from, right below X, write Y, someone you care about. This is a person that's just the first person that you think of when I said someone you care about. Don't try to think too much. It can also be something. We had someone write their dog a previous time that we did this. It's totally acceptable. Someone you care about. Underneath Y, write Z and write a place that you love. This is a location that, again, one of the first places that came to mind when I said a place you love. So something that feels like easy to you, something that feels like home, something that feels warm to you, a good memory you have. Now to complete this technique, all you need to do is to combine X, Y, and Z. So you're going to create a scenario for yourself in which you combine X, this thing you love to do, you're doing it with this person that you care about in the place you love. It needs to take place something like 5 years ago, if not 10 years ago, that this thing happened. And you're just going to make a memory, like Total Recall style, right? Like go back in time, make a memory for yourself that is something you love to do with someone you care about in a place you love. And to really build it out for yourself, think about how you got there, why you guys did what you did, what it was like, how you felt. Really build out this memory for yourself. Right, so this one, remembering the future. what you're actually doing when you do something like that, it doesn't seem that profound perhaps to you, but what you're really doing is if you can begin to construct images in your mind, those images create memories that make possibilities more plausible. So the more you cultivate images of that are designed, that are consciously designed by you, the more you create the plausibilities. Like you just made that plausible by merit of the fact that you combined all of those things together and made that memory. That meant that it could have happened. And that means that if it could have happened, then more things could happen in the future, right? So the images you carry, they have an impact on your behavior. The images that you cast about your present day, about your future, they have an impact on the way that you behave on a daily basis. It may not seem like it, or it might seem like you're not making images at all. But in fact, you are. There's a book written back in the 70s by one of the seminal futurist named Fred Pollock, who's a survivor of the Holocaust. It's a definitive work. It's really amazing, but he talks extensively about why it is that images hold so much power for us. And so he is famous for saying that the rise and fall of images of the future precedes or accompanies the rise and fall of cultures. If a whole culture of people are filled with negative images, that's going to have an impact on the trajectory for that culture. And for you personally, that means that the more you can cultivate the kinds of images that would be articulations of the futures that you'd prefer, the more you can open yourself to the possibility that those futures could happen, that you could have a hand in shaping them. So that's remembering the future. Now, I know it might sound weird because both of these things have taken place in the past. Honestly, it's the work is the same. If you're simulating, it doesn't matter if it's a future time horizon or a past one. Your mind will still be challenged to simulate an alternative you into the present day, into the past, whenever. So the last one. This last one, so I was trying to look, so this has more impact when I'm like in human form because I was trying to use the gallery thing so I could see people's faces when I show it. And I at least saw 2 smiles. So, okay, so everybody knows on some human level what it's like to feel like the people that are in this picture, right? We understand happiness, exuberance, just outright sort of unbridled joy, right? Not a thing that hopefully you're familiar with that feeling, I should say. Hopefully you know what that feels like. And so that thing that happened to you when you saw the photo and you smiled back at it is called easy empathy. For the purposes of today anyway, it's called emotional empathy. It's your body and your mind are familiar with that feeling. That's great. It's not at all what we want to talk about. So the only reason I did that was just to contrast the fact that that's not at all what we're actually going to be covering. So, because sometimes it's just misunderstood. So what we're going to actually be talking about is hard empathy. It's sometimes called cognitive empathy. This means that you, well, we'll go ahead and use the slides, Jeremy. You find an example of a person whose experiences are different from your realities. It's called hard empathy because it's about taking on the cognitive basis, right? Taking on the point of view of the world of someone who's not all like you. It's about taking on what that life is like and what it's like to live it as you, but with a completely different point of view on the world. So it's not just emotional. It's actually seeing the world completely differently for a moment in time. So taking your point of view, taking what matters to you, your values, putting them to the side, taking on the values, experiences, and point of view of someone who's very different than you. So to do this well, you have a couple of options for today. One is to think about something that you do hold dear, and then think about the kinds of people that you've encountered, because I'm sure that they exist, of the people who don't see the world the way you do, the people who would have the opposing point of view. And so what you begin to do is take that on. Or I was actually just reading an account of someone who spent some time in Pakistan, specifically in Karachi, and they wrote about what it was like to live in the most developed, city in Pakistan, but they had no power, they had no running water utilities. They everywhere they went, they were just like, things were covered in flies, And this was just a friend who just wrote a personal, entry in a blog about what life was like. And then I began thinking, well, what would it be like to be someone who grew up there? And so the trick to this is not to imagine yourself either as that Pakistani person, but as you, but just with those experiences. So, or you, but with a completely different set of experiences and point of view. So, not to jump into the fray of like what's popular today to argue about, but let's say if you are in favor of more stay-at-home order, sort of approaches to how we deal with our present crisis, then take on the point of view of someone who's chanting like reopen now or going to the protests. Or if you're more so on that side of the argument, for a moment, take on what the experiences and the point of view is of the person who has the opposite of you. And you begin to build, you imagine your life now as that person. What would you be feeling? What would concern you? What would you be thinking about? Again, the ones that are most helpful for me are the people who are the most different from me. So I have lived a life where I've had a lot of comfort and luxuries, just by virtue of where I was born. So if I imagine, Jeremy, but Jeremy was, in Pakistan from the time that I was little, what would be different about the way that I would interpret the world? How would I feel? What would be different in terms of my priorities? What would be the most important thing to me, right? So challenge yourself to lean into, as much as you can, that kind of thinking. That's hard empathy. So harder to do is a facilitated exercise, but I will tell you this one in particular is extremely helpful if you can develop the mindset and practice of doing it. If you can develop the mindset and practice of having strong opinions and ideas about the world, but being willing to put them aside to try another one on, to see what that would feel like, be like, how would you see the world differently? Because often, as I'm sure you're familiar, easy empathy sometimes just doesn't work. Like to assume that you know why someone's angry, or to see that someone's angry is sometimes not enough. But you can get to see, like if you're approached by someone, let's say a coworker, let's say someone that you're trying to work on a project with and they seem angry, you can definitely from an easy empathy perspective sometimes interpret and understand that they're angry, but they don't make sense to you, sometimes. And the reason that they don't make sense is because you haven't fully understood where they're really coming from. There's a formulation my friend Dave Gray has for this, and he says that people's behavior makes sense to them, and if it doesn't make sense to you, you're missing something. So what you're doing when you do that, why does it relate to futures, is that it unlocks for you more possibility. When you can begin to see the world differently, when you can take on a different point of view, even a challenging one, especially a challenging one, you have a more creative mind that's open to other things that could be. And you're also better to win over difficult people because you can understand them. Like, who was the person on your high school debate team that was the star? Well, it's the person who could do the opposition argument really well, right? And the reason for that is that, they could take on a completely different point of view. And you're actually simulating a different reality for yourself. You're still doing the work that a a futurist would do. You're just doing it in the present moment. So you have 3 exercises we've done. We've predicted the past, we've remembered the future, and we've practiced some hard empathy. And I think that I'm going to give the nod to Tamara, because this is where she's far more experienced than I. What we'd like to be able to do is to entreat you to pick one of them that you feel most comfortable with sharing. And I think, are you going to like, just like overlord divide people into pairs? Is that the deal?
Yes, we are going to get some hard empathy towards our fellow people on the call. And we are going to have a real conversation about these exercises.
Right. So when you're paired,
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just splitting everyone up and then let us know what we should talk about.
Yeah, when you're paired with your person, tell them, give them either your moment from your predicting the past and where you are right now in your trip. You could tell them you're remembering the future. You could tell them about the memory you have, or you can talk to them about what it was like for you to be a different version of you in hard empathy. And then we're actually going to call everyone back together, and we're just going to report on what the conversations were like.
All right, sounds good. Are we ready?
Oh, yeah.
Let's do it.
How they could change the seating configurations to allow for the space and having the barriers up. And I was like baffled thinking about how they can make that work financially, but.
Those containers need to think of someone else.
Hi, friends. Oh, good. Everybody showed their faces, hopefully, in their meetings that they had. Love it. How were the conversations?
Good. Tamara, your background's cracking me up.
I'm on a trip. Any interesting conversation? I guess, anything anyone wants to share?
Well, I'll start. I have 2 kind of like thoughts as we were kind of going through it in our group. One is that our group likes lakes. So we talked a good amount about lakes, and I learned about the curvature of lakes. And what was the name of them? Was it Oxbow? Oxbow? I wasn't familiar with that. So that was really interesting.
Oxbow.
That's what, thank you. But the other thing I thought was really cool, it seemed like as people started describing it and we asked questions, that brought those future memories to life even more. So that act of actually having the conversation, not just thinking about it, but then trying to relay it to someone, brought it to life in a new way and added additional context and texture, which was really, really cool. So it's really important to share those memories that you're having to bring additional life to them.
They're now your memories too.
Yeah, I'll take them. They sound fabulous.
Visualized it, yeah. Anything else? Anything anyone wants to share?
Tamara, our group was actually pretty great. We were chatting about the difficulties of actually being in hard empathy. And, the 2 gentlemen I met with, they actually really had a great way of like, you got to erase where your head is and put yourself truly in other people's thoughts and process. The quandary of that is sometimes you see unlimited possibilities, which means, okay, how do I make a decision? But also that sense of empathy is at a totally different level where you can't even really, you almost are like, now do I even have a stand? Do I really even have my convictions? I don't know. I'm curious as to how far that can go when you start really diving very deep and understanding everybody's point of view to that level.
Well, and I would add to that as part of that conversation that we didn't actually get to, another possible downfall of the hard empathy that you have to be aware of is that when you're putting yourself in someone else's head, you are making assumptions about what their head is like. And if you make the wrong assumptions and base those assumptions based on stereotypes, then you can go down a very bad path and a very wrong path. So it's just something to be aware of.
Yeah, I know I'm super interested in, how we correct for or create supplements for our 50,000-year-old hardware. That's how I describe the cognitive bias and things in our brain, is that, you know, there's shortcomings clearly there that do not match our current environment or certainly our future environment, and what kind of concessions can be made. I'm excited about virtual reality for that sense, and some of the, you know, empathetic use cases for virtual reality as well, to put yourself in those mindsets and create those images that then imprint those into your meat model.
Yes. I have a question for Jeremy.
Please.
Or you, Tamara.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing about hard empathy is I kept layering on my bias, which is a Buddhist practice of what compassion is, which is looking for the commonality. We've all felt fear, anger, shame, jealousy, whatever those things are, that's a human feeling, and to kind of go in with the idea that if I can make friends and not make friends with my own emotions, whatever they are, for however period of time I'm going to have them or not, I can make friends with someone else's. I can feel the same sort of gentle recognition of that. And so it was interesting to focus on the difference in the hard empathy. And I don't know, it brought another, and I think kind of richer perspective to it as well.
Yeah, it's encouraging to hear people would even dive into the hard empathy one. It is probably one of the more challenging, you know, of course, because I mean, the other two, you know, exercises ask you to think about stuff you love.
Yeah, that's easy.
And so, you know, leaning into hard empathy, you know, I was working, and I reference him later on, you know, there's a futurist named Jake Dunnigan, and they created simulations in mainland, or not mainland, but the big island Hawaii, because there was an area in that island that, and I can't remember the name of it specifically, but there was a whole group of these neighborhood, you know, folks who were like, we don't want big box retail, we don't want chain places coming in here and converting our neighborhood. We don't like those kinds of futures, so we're trying to, you know, take action to make sure this doesn't happen. And so what this group of futurists did that were studying future studies on the island is they actually created an alternate reality in the present day. So they worked with some of the storefront owners, and they hung up signs saying that TGI Fridays is coming here and that there's these luxury lofts that are going in. So they created this growth scenario of the future. So, and then they on the bottom, it had a website that you go to and it says it's a hoax, right? It's like, they didn't intend necessarily to cause any real trouble, but people actually did get, so you had a whole faction of people who got really upset, of course, because they thought it was real. Like, they thought this was really happening. But what was more interesting is there was a contingency of people within that group that were actually like, well, you know, I mean, at least something's going in that building now, so maybe that's pretty good. Or maybe, you know, some of the assumptions we had about this growth future for ourselves, maybe some of that stuff's not so bad, you know, which is pretty amazing, right? Because it's like, well, and to the point that was being made earlier, like, maybe I'm more open to futures than I thought I was. And it seems to happen over and over again when we do, if there's like a hoax or an alternate scenario that you run through, people are more open to change and more malleable than maybe they may understand about themselves. And that's part of the magic of it, right? Is that if you can take on that difference, and then for a moment you can go, but I could actually be okay, you know, like, that's a future that maybe I'm okay with, more so than I thought I was. And one challenge is this, like, we have definitive convictions these days. If you look at Twitter anyway. And so, like, when was the last time that you, like, changed your mind on something? like something important, you know, it's hard for me to remember, like, to be honest, like, it's not an easy thing, so if you can for a moment play act what that's like, even though, as Nicholas said too, like understanding that you're making some baseline assumptions, likely that you're making some assumptions, but even with that, knowing that you're doing that, accepting that, you can create for yourself at least the capacity to simulate different realities.
I mean, I think that, yeah, we're all going through that today too, and adaptation, and some of these things are not so bad. I know a lot of people that are not looking forward to going back to work. So working from home is the new way. And as much as I miss everybody, I am feeling really glad about being in yoga pants every day. I'm gonna miss that if I have to go back. No, for real though. There's another interesting thing that I'll maybe leave us with that is fun on the adaptation part, and there's some really great discussion about this for our communities and our organizations, and the idea that there's an adaptability quotient, an AQ, kind of like an EQ or an IQ. Those things are going to serve you well, but your AQ in today's organization, in today's families, societies, whatever place you find yourself in, is actually a much better predictor of success today, in today's times, as things change very fast, and that there are ways to measure your level of adaptability and how you think about change, how you strive for and create change and desire change and are curious about it. And that mindset and that AQ is super important. So leave us all with that as we think about taking on some of this new hard empathy and adapting our own mindset to include it.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
Right. I'm wanted to let you. I hope it's cool for me to say, Tamara. I'm willing to send a version of this to anybody who'd want it, and if there's questions or anything like that afterwards, that's great. This is really meant to just be an invitation to take on the mindset that can be ripe for interpreting possibility. So it can be part, and I think, Tamara, when you came to our offices and we did this in human form, it was a great way that you left it when you said, make this, if you do any kind of daily journaling, or if you do anything to discover more about yourself, these prompts provide you with an endless supply of things that you can do to open your mind to more possibilities. Again, it's an actual discipline, an actual thing you can do to begin doing that, rather than just saying, well, I embrace being change ready. Well, what in the world does that look like every day? Well, hopefully, if you could do something like this, you can build for yourself the mental muscle necessary to do so.
Great, thanks.
Thank you so much for scheduling this. I don't know if it was intentionally to be held during a pandemic, or if the cosmos wove this timely.
We waited for a pandemic.
Yeah, I have friends that would be interested and would benefit from this. I see a recording. Is there a chance we could get access to the recording? Is it something that we could share with people? I know of others who would benefit from this.
Sure thing. Yes, we definitely will. And keep an eye on this. The Speculative Futures St. Louis channel. We want to bring this type of thing and create these kind of discussions continuously. So look forward to the next one then as well.
Can I plug one more thing?
Welcome.
I'm sorry.
Yes, please.
So that all these exercises in particular, these 3 exercises, part of Jane McGonigal is the name of the futurist from the IFTF. She actually leads a Coursera class that you can take. So if you find yourself with some, like, an hour a week that you could dedicate to taking a course, the Coursera, if you go to Coursera and you look for Institute for the Future, you'll find the Foresight Essentials, and it's an entire framework that you can take. And I completely ripped these from her. They're her exercises. So they're from Jane McGonigal. And she's the one who designed these 3 together.
And I can vouch for it. I'm taking the courses right now. It's really digestible and engaging. And yeah, not an incredible investment in your time. So definitely can promote that myself too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Have a great day.
Bye guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.